So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the worst boy band ever. I mean, look at this photo. But no, realistically, we're going to be asking a question. I don't do a lot of question mark titles, but the question I'm going to ask you is, does the UK actually intend to use the protocol legislation, as in actually invoke it? Because if we read these articles right, it very much looks like the UK government are trying to force the DUP back into Stormont and to reopen Stormont fully before this thing even passes Parliament properly, before this thing even gets through the Lords. And let's not forget the Lords and the House of Commons can try and make amendments to this thing. So its current draft legislation form may not be the final bill. There can be amendments and things added to it or changes made. So ministers have told unionist politicians they must re-establish full power sharing with Sinn Féin before Parliament is asked to pass a controversial new law that would override parts of the protocol. So before this thing's even in place fully, the UK have told the DUP, get back into Stormont, lickety split. And this was from the 12th of June. And there's some interesting bits from this article, which is, in order to strengthen the government's argument, ministers have privately told the DUP that they will not push the bill through the House of Lords. So effectively, what they've told the DUP is, before this thing passes, you best be in Stormont, otherwise this thing will drag on. And the government's arguments for this are really weird. Sources said the government needs the DUP to move as demonstration both to the EU and the United States that the problems of the protocol could be fixed. But that doesn't, using the new legislation doesn't make sense. The protocol, the argument that Stormont has to be open to the point where we're going to tank, potentially the protocol and also the Good Friday Agreement makes no sense. They also want to counter arguments of critics who say the DUP has no intention of restoring power sharing. I think they do want to restore power sharing, but they're going to wait for the protocol to be scrapped, or at least key parts of it, and merely wants to force the government to call a fresh elections in the hope that they can return once again as the largest party. I think if there's a new election, I can't see them returning as the largest party, especially after the fact that there was just an election recently and they just messed up. I think what will happen is they'll end up hemorrhaging votes to the UUP, who are less radical than the DUP, the TUV, who are more radical than the DUP, and probably the Alliance Party as well. The onus is on the DUP to show good faith and nominate not just a Speaker for the Stormont Assembly, but also a Deputy First Minister to allow power sharing to get fully up and running. And that tells me that, they want Stormont fully to be operational. And, once they elect a Speaker and have an executive going, this thing's fully operational. Let's not forget here that the House of Commons did actually change the rules around the executive. So the House of Commons passed a bill. I'm not sure if this has become a full law, but if we look, if I find that bit of text I was looking for, which is here, the legislation would extend the time to replace the First or Deputy First Ministers in the event of a resignation from 7 days to at least 24 weeks. So effectively what would happen is, once they've got Stormont operational and they've got an executive, if someone in the DUP or Sinn Féin resign, instead of having 7 days to sort things out, they'd have 24 weeks. That would keep Stormont open far longer. We saw it at the start of the year, I think it was the start of this year, where the DUP resigned from Stormont, and after a few weeks Stormont was effectively closed because they couldn't operate without an executive. They've changed that period now. It'll be closer to 24 weeks before Stormont has to be forced closed. It would allow a calling off period if either the First or Deputy First Minister changed their roles. Resigned from their roles, and this law was passed around the time I think the DUP were really causing problems. So the question is, does the government actually intend to use this legislation? Because it very much looks like they're trying to force the DUP into Stormont to fully open it, and then once they've done that, to maybe they won't pass this thing, or maybe they will never use this legislation. One senior Tory member of the ERG said that they got the vast majority of what they wanted. Let's not forget Liz Truss apparently consulted them for this legislation. It's not by any means perfect, but the key elements are all there, they said. So clearly the ERG are happy with this bill, so they'll vote it through. That's something we'll talk about in another article, that the government has the votes, which is ominous. You've got the DUP rebuffing the appeal to restore power sharing in Stormont. So this is from the 14th of June, which is the DUP have rebuffed the British government's appeal to restore power sharing in Stormont, despite the introduction of the legislation to scrap the checks in the RSC, at least the ones in the Green Lane. Donaldson said Parliament can choose to go forward with the agreement and the political institutions and stability in Northern Ireland, or keep the protocol, but it can't have both. So effectively saying it's the Good Friday Agreement or the protocol, which we know is not the case. It was a blunt rejection of Liz Truss, who told the DUP to get on with it, effectively open Stormont. Truss justified overturning swathes of the protocol, which formed part of the divorce bill with the EU, on the grounds that it was necessary to restore power sharing in Stormont. She said the people deserve to have a government. Power sharing should resume as soon as possible, but the DUP are happy to wait on this until I think this thing passes the Lords. The DUP have demanded that changes the protocol, which it says weaken the region's economy, which is not true. The Northern Ireland's economy is doing really well. Donaldson made clear that his party would only budge after legislation passed through Westminster. Now, I don't know if that means the bill becomes a law, for example, or if that means it passes through the Lords. I'm assuming if it becomes a law. The Northern Ireland Protocol and the Good Friday Agreement cannot exist together, according to Donaldson, but we know that's not the case. So I think he's kind of said two different things here. One is he wants it to get through. I think in one article he talked about getting it through the vast majority of the parliamentary procedure, and in this one he's talked about it effectively having to become a law before he's going to rejoin Stormont, and that could take a long time. I think if Stormont isn't opened within 6 months, there'll be a fresh election, so he doesn't have a lot of time, unless he's gambling for whatever reason that suddenly more people in Northern Ireland will vote for him. I don't know where he's getting that idea from. Then you've got Sammy Wilson, who, this is an article I just saw. Sammy Wilson claiming the DUP has promised Liz Truss they will return to Stormont once the protocol is sorted. What does that mean? Are you talking about once the bill becomes a law, or are you talking about once the checks in the RSC and the other stuff are done? Which one is he talking about? That's a key question, and I don't think he answers it. But she said she's not going to rip up the protocol, but argued there were changing elements that didn't work. So it's very clear that maybe the DUP are a bit torn on it. They're saying they want to return as soon as possible. But they haven't actually said fully, I think, what they want, which tells me that the DUP are effectively, I think, playing the government, which they're telling the government they're going to go in as soon as the protocol is sorted, but I don't think they've actually defined what sorting the protocol means fully. I think what they're doing is they're going to tell the government that they want the protocol scrapped. Once it's done, they will reopen Stormont. What that will do to Sinn Féin and the other parties in Stormont, I don't know, but I have the question genuinely. Are the British government going to use this legislation? Do they intend to use it? Because they're trying to push the DUP back into Stormont, elect a speaker, elect a deputy first minister, etc. Then you see the fact that the law was changed last year in order to stop a collapse of Stormont to happen so quickly. Knocked my microphone a bit. Sorry about that. They've talked about how the government have changed the rules around the collapse of the executive, moving it from 7 days to 24 weeks. That's a huge increase. 24 weeks is a long time, especially given parliamentary recesses and things like that. So I think it's, in my opinion at least, it looks like the government are going to just try and push the DUP back into Stormont, and I don't think they're ever actually going to use this legislation just because the damage it will do to the British reputation. I mean, we're already facing legal action from the EU, for example. Things will get far worse if the government try and invoke this legislation. But that's just my opinion anyways. This government are full of lunatics. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.